Champions, prepare for battle! Defeat the general, gain glory, and grab that great rune! A celebration of war! The Radon Festival!
Are you good and prepared, young chum?
If you've spent any time around the gaming sphere within the past month, then you know how much of a force Elden Ring has become. From Software's recent action-adventure RPG has garnered unanimous critical acclaim and became a monstrous success sales-wise. From my own experience in a TLDR impression of the game merely 30 hours in, there truly is nothing like it. I am constantly finding new things, new areas, and new combat approaches. Every time I think the game is about to reveal its hand, I am quickly reminded just how little I've truly found and how endless the possibilities feel. If this keeps up, I honestly think this may be the greatest open world game I've ever played. But I can't help but think of how people are most likely struggling with this game. And to that extent, Elden Ring's obtuse approach to how difficult traversing this open world is, and the difficulty that arrives through its long progression with the Dark Souls gameplay integrated within. Yes, Elden Ring is difficult. It's very difficult. And it's understandable why this game turned many people off, dropping it and even refunding the game altogether. I also feel that people saw George R.R. Martin's name in the advertising and expected a playable Game of Thrones-esque action game in an open world and got swept up in the hype only to get something completely different. I want to make this clear. I understand. Because long ago, I was you. And aside from two titles from the hallowed Souls-like lineage, Bloodbourne and Dark Souls 3, I didn't think these games were for me either. And you know who else feels bad? Elden Ring's game director and the father of the Souls-like genre, Hidetaka Miyazaki. In an interview with The New Yorker earlier this year, he sympathizes,
I do feel apologetic toward anyone who feels there's just too much to overcome in my games. I just want as many players as possible to experience the joy that comes from overcoming hardship. Get good.
I think on top of Miyazaki's personal sympathies, this quote is an essential piece of not only Elden Ring's success, but also to why it's so beloved as well as the other games in the Souls lineage. If you're someone who has decided to not pursue Elden Ring or the other Souls games further, this video probably won't be swaying you, and that's okay. There's honestly no shame in dropping something that frustrates you so much, and I hope you find the game that makes you the most satisfied. However, I am making this video for a very specific audience. Those who are struggling and at their wits' end, and to those who are still on the fence about wanting to purchase and commit to such an esoteric title. In this video, I hope to answer what may be a simple question on the surface, but is actually more nuanced than you may believe. What is the appeal of Elden Ring? Why do people who play this game choose to unearth the mystery of discovering the open world and uncovering the unique elements of its creatures and items, entrenching themselves in understanding the deep combat that exists to teach you rather than punish you, and even how all these elements in From Software's difficulty are deeply rooted in its overall theme. And understand that all the feelings that I express here are merely that, my personal feelings. You may disagree, but if you're able to meet me halfway, maybe with these factors and more, I can convince you on why so many people have enjoyed Elden Ring so much, and how From Software, Hidetaka Miyazaki, and even myself believes in you, and how it believes that today, more than any other day, is a fine day to die. More than anything, I think a lot about Elden Ring's open world. How Elden Ring engulfs you in mystery and intrigue in its open world by refusing to hold your hand. A lot of gamers are so used to having open worlds hold your hand by littering your map with icons and visual reminders of distance remaining from any location that's always within arm's reach, and you never have to think about where your next aim and next story mission is. To me, there's no sense of mystery or depth in the world if I have all these icons that tell me where to go and what to find. In Elden Ring, however, From Software completely strips this away, and to a lot of new players, I understand why the approach to making the map so vague is frustrating. But here's why it works. The way From Software implements the map is that it trusts the player and their intelligence to discover what areas could be interesting and the dangers that possibly come with it. For example, let's look at the map of Limgrave. By removing icons that would tell us where specific locations, bases, and meaningful bosses are, the game respects us enough to recognize location, object recognition, and color to know what is what and where it is. Oh, look at all these tan areas contrasting with the green and blue. The blue represents rivers or swamps, where green represents forests, both of which must house plentiful wildlife that represents their environment and the flora and fauna there having ingredients to craft items with. Look at that giant building in the map's north. Something that big must have a strong boss in it that applies to the main quest. By trusting the player to use their object recognition, use of color, and common sense, the player is rewarded by making world exploration feel less like a chore and more of what all action RPGs should be, a quest. A quest in which you, the player, can build your own stories and have your own adventures, on top of the overall narrative. If you've heard any player praise Elden Ring and its open world, a lot of it is down to just the sheer depth in which the game lets you dig deep into the environment, where your curiosity and sense of adventure in a mysterious and constantly dangerous world is rewarded with plenty of items to either improve your weapons, new spells, and even entire sets of armor. For example, one of my favorite armor sets in the game, the Royal Remain suit, wasn't obtained by grinding types of metal or hides of an animal or clearing a certain amount of forts to craft or unlock, but a full-blown experience where by visiting a creepy village, death consumed every corner of every home. Villagers were hung, and those that remained were wild and bloodthirsty. The last remaining villager had to hide to survive. There's immediately a sense of apprehension and unease the way this village gets presented, highlighted in which the survivor speaks to you that makes the medallion that he gives you feel ominous. The effects of that medallion triggering a mini-boss fight the next time you visit the Round Table Hold come out of nowhere. This was so shocking because even in the safest place possible, you could never predict where a deadly attack would follow. But the reward that was countered with this risk was not only a suit that was given more worth fighting for, but the personal story and tips I could give to other players with how rewarding and intense the experience was for me. Another example of how From Software makes the world mysterious and dangerous is the Transporter Trap. Everyone who's played this game, I would bet, has a story of the Transporter Trap. I can remember clearing out a camp of soldiers in Limgrave and going into the dragon-burnt ruins and finding a nice little treasure chest and thinking to myself, oh, there must be some good loot in here, only for a puff of smoke to transport my dumbass into a literal hellscape called... It wasn't planned. I wasn't supposed to be there at all. When I was in the cave, I couldn't fast travel to the nearest site of grace. The very ground was killing me. All of this on top of creepy centipede men, nightmarishly large crows, and devil dogs killing me in 2 hits. And yet, exploring this area was far more memorable to me than any location recent AAA open worlds have given me. Why is this? And why would anyone put themselves through this torture? This is because the terror and anxiety K-LED gives you so early in the game makes you focus more on how you're going to escape and the monstrosities you have to endure doubled as a purposeful teaching moment. Through Kaled, the game taught me how to travel around its more dangerous lands and how it's okay to retreat from undesirable encounters, and that you don't have to fight every monstrous enemy to survive. If you can make it out of Kaled, the information this area gives you will make any poisonous or hostile section of the game far more manageable. Finally, a great way Elden Ring builds its world is letting the player piece together a greater narrative through encounters you have in its locations. Let's take the Academy of Raya Lucaria for example. Through pure gameplay and visuals, From Software fills the area with danger and decadence, but also narrative depth through its vast academic halls filled with literature, rooms are aglow in candlelight, and the vast array of crystals powering the very spells your enemies launch at you. I know this because by the game allowing you to explore with no hints or icons, you can find low-level enemies digging through the ground and using mining contraptions to unearth these crystals that look identical to those that power the wizard staffs. Now, this might be me digging a bit too deep in terms of finding lore, but the fact that From Software is able to fill each of these areas with such rich visual language allows the player to craft their own adventures and narratives without the game dumping this information in a cutscene or shoehorning a quest log that told us what to expect. And if you need more evidence on how Miyazaki's philosophy in world building and world design influenced Elden Ring's open world exploration, in an interview with Game Rant back in 2015 when Dark Souls was coming out, he states,
I am conscious of that when I make these games. I try to make a game that has beautiful open spaces, gaps, room for players to enjoy it in ways that were not authored. I never want it to be where you have to follow the rules completely, where you have to do things exactly as the designers intended.
And moments like this are all over Elden Ring's world. Now, bringing this back to the player who still feels frustrated and on the fence, I know how much I personally hate having my hand held at every given moment in terms of location, spoon-feeding you all the locations to visit and items to collect. It gets boring, and you feel like the game isn't taking you seriously and is wasting your time with busy work. However, if you trust in Elden Ring's philosophy of discovery, you will be openly rewarded for how adventurous you get to be, and that feeling being rewarded by allowing you to find awesome loot, armor, improved weapons, and tools to improve said weapons, to engage in the world that stimulates your curiosity. It really makes you feel clever, and that cleverness is rewarded through sheer triumph, and that sense of triumph isn't exclusive to exploration, but through From Software's most celebrated quality, its combat. Elden Ring is an action RPG, and while I spent a lot of time telling you about the adventure part, From Software is all about the action. The Souls games have always been infamous for how difficult and esoteric their approaches to combat have been, especially when compared to how other Western AAA games approach their combat. For more than a decade now, Western AAA games have been borrowing from the Arkham formula. Give the player the feeling of a power fantasy through combat by pressing one singular button to counter when a color-coded signifier alerts the player of what can and can't be blocked, and when to dodge. While there have been methods to change this formula, overall developers implement this design for a very specific reason: to instill the sense of an unstoppable power fantasy. If you're a new player, or you're vicariously viewing this combat through someone else, then you already know how daunting and brutal deaths are in this game, with how much all those cues and mechanics are stripped away. But what if I told you, Elden Ring is still able to make you feel powerful, despite that initial hurdle? The reason fans love the combat in Elden Ring, and by proxy all Souls games, is because it's built around not just management and timing, but creativity and experimentation. You could have the beefiest armor and biggest sword, and still get obliterated by a well-organized mob in seconds. This is because Elden Ring demands that you learn how attacks are patterned, learn what attacks are best blocked or dodged based on how much your stamina bar can manage your strategy you implement, all while still attempting to get a good hit in. Most players in Elden Ring, when they start, always go in swinging, getting greedy for their strikes, and while that may work against some enemies, try that on a big boy and... Yeah. But the power fantasy doesn't come from being able to destroy everything around you. It comes from how calculating and shrewd your attacks are, being rewarded for how well you managed your stamina and attack timing. It also helps that the controls just feel good. Every action feels so responsive, and the sheer heft that is delivered in every weapon is just so satisfying that when you unleash that one big sword swing or hammer drop, you can almost feel the weight and impact. And when you're able to game a boss and balance your moments of offense with a good defense, nailing an enemy with that one visceral strike that takes a third of their health, tell me that isn't satisfying. But any From Software veteran knows that understanding your stamina bar and its economy on attacks and dodges is easier said than done. For example, I want to use an example I recently had in the Academy, where after getting a wildly lucky victory against the Red Wolf of Ragadan, made my way up a flight of stairs to meet this absolute pain in the ass, the Moongrum Carrion Knight. Upon first impression, they may not look like much, a small knight with sword and shield, but it's the way they read you and your attacks is so laser focused that poor management and greed in your attacks will spell instant death with his ability to parry you and go through a second phase where magic gets involved. This is, however, a perfect enemy to have a problem with, as they are a teacher on how to handle not only sword and shield types, but also any online invaders that enter your game to ruin your day for no reason. Bringing up your shield to block swift attacks, hit him once, maybe twice when he slows, and dodge when he winds up. If you can effectively carry out this strategy, they may be tough, but they aren't impossible. A good way I've thought about combat in Elden Ring is this one video I saw from Cave313, where a sensei is instructing his student on managing his anxiety through dodging, developing the child's awareness to develop his instincts upon an attack.
Yes, son.
We snap on the leg, he got back.
If you respond on a what if, you will get in trouble.
You got it, just like that. That's
You
how
have
you
to
want
wait
be,
some
all
time
right?
before you
Y'all
make that
do that.
decision.
Yeah.
If you move too soon, move now, move just like you did, I'll abort and just hit you in your head. Stand back up. Move when you think you should move on this weapon. Do you understand? Back up, quick. There you go. Back up. Yes.
We fear the object more than we do the actual person. Every noob From Software player is terrified of getting hit and always panic rolls, letting the fear of another attack overwhelm them, but predicting the attack at the last minute forces the boss to commit to the attack before they can catch you in a roll. Managing your anxiety to go from being afraid of getting hit to letting them be afraid to make a mistake and let them pay. Another great example of how rewarding combat is in Elden Ring is the Margit fight. Both him and the knight act as excellent gatekeepers, instructors that expect you to learn the fundamentals, that if you can manage them, you can manage whatever comes next. Obviously, Margit is a much bigger enemy, but his tells and windups are so that they teach the player to understand when the best time to dodge is. Also, if he's too hard, the game will let you use spirit summons, special allies like wolves, jellyfish, or actual soldiers to help as a distraction in battle. Or you can find an item in the open world called Margit Shackles that can be reused to bind him to the ground to get free hits in. Which goes back to my argument about how mystery in an open world can be rewarding. You also never have to bash your head against the wall in this game because combat is so that no matter what level you are, you can always go back to an easier spot in the map, fight weaker enemies, get their runes, level up to get stronger, and make that boss eat shit. I hate you! All this together makes combat feel extremely rewarding with how free and thoughtful it is, but the trick is that you never get too comfortable with a combat style. This is due to how shockingly vast Elden Ring's enemy variety is. It's truly a creative feat, just the sheer amount of enemy types there are. It's an uncanny sight to behold when I have yet to meet an enemy that is recycled. Sure, some knights and ghouls may reappear here and there, but the sheer level of bears, bats, giants, stone giants, evil magicians, crystal miners, giant crabs, giant lobsters, frogmen that do cartwheels, giant tanks that shoot fire, metal contraptions with blades that suck you in and drain your health, dragons, is always so uncomfortably tense no matter how immensely leveled up you are, and that fear renders you as a player completely in awe of their existence. The flip side to that, though, is how satisfying it is when you finally defeat them. The game keeps constantly pushing you to learn how to try new strategies to fight newer foes in meaningful ways. Learning what weapons or spells can work best. Speaking of which, this depth and freedom to which you can approach combat extends into the specific builds you can put into your character. Want to get into some
Crazy whiz-biz!
with a pure sorcery build? Put all your runes into intelligence in mind, with armor and staffs to make you feel like a badass witch or wizard. Wanna be a walking tank? Dishing out just as much as you take in damage-wise? Say no more with spending your runes on strength and endurance to rock the bulkiest and baddest of armors and greatest of greatswords. Or maybe you're impatient and want to be nimble and quick, getting in as many hits as possible with weapons that deal quick and efficient strikes that deal massive bleed damage. Pure Dex build is the best build, aka my build. Not even to mention the best armor sets, ashes of war, talismans, and spells that bring out the best in the stats you decide to level up. Don't like what you got and want to try something new? Renala and the Academy will let you start completely from scratch. Honestly, it feels like I'm just scratching the surface of the sheer bewildering depth and freedom combat allows you in Elden Ring. It's hands down the most accessible for new players in terms of player freedom and tools to help even the odds. Even magic is strongly encouraged given how many spells and weapon buffs called Ashes of War you're given. Be it fire, lightning, or good old poison, most everything gets obliterated with a flick of a staff or weapon buff, as well as the very useful spirit summons. Now, From Software veterans will whine about their inclusion, making the game easier, and while one, how dare you disrespect my jelly son, and two, their existence doesn't overwhelmingly turn the tide in your favor, merely offering a distraction to give you the ability to get some serious hits in. And if you're a dex build with a blood loss build-up, they can be seriously helpful to distract bosses enough to build that meter for massive damage. It's that utilization of variety, freedom, and skill that keeps fans of these games coming back, and for Elden Ring, a whole new generation to learn what it's like to break the sound barrier with joy over slaying a tough boss. This very sentiment of joy through conquering adversity isn't just something fans of From Software games feel, but it's the very crux of Hidetaka Miyazaki's entire design philosophy, ever since Demon's Souls back in 2009. In an interview with Wired when Dark Souls 3 was coming out, he discussed his game design philosophy when asked about why he makes such challenging experiences. He admits,
I have no intention to make the game more difficult than other titles on purpose. It's just something required to make this style of game. Ever since Demon's Souls, I've really been pursuing making games that give players a sense of accomplishment by overcoming tremendous odds.
As a fan, and many fans of these games can attest, death is never a frustration, but an inevitability. It's a part of the learning process. And it's that learning process where you never have to be forced into a single style, and anything you decide to upgrade is powerful and useful in its own special way. Because of all these factors, if you're a newcomer to the Souls games, combat feels constantly fresh, and the strategies in which you defeat these creatures is always changing, and your excitement and satisfaction for defeating them never runs out. Because you're always learning and being taught to be better, as every enemy is a teacher, every death a lesson, and every victory a celebration. But to me and a lot of players, Elden Ring is more than that. Elden Ring is special for a reason. Special for how they make the player feel. It's not just the ceaseless scope of the lands between or the exciting complexity of the combat, because everything from story, exploration, and gameplay feeds into one single complex theme. And it's that complex theme that, when you understand it, you will learn to appreciate these games in a more nuanced light. Regardless of the story being told in other AAA games, whether it's Kratos in God of War, realizing the error of his anger and breaking his cycle of violence, Kratos is still an all-powerful god who can rip through enemies with ease. In Insomniac's Spider-Man, regardless of Spider-Man's life falling apart watching the man he idolized become the villain in the story, he is still a superpowered crime fighter who zips through criminals and rogues in seconds. In Ghost of Tsushima, Jin Sakai is torn between his honor and fighting for his people, but he is still a ruthless, skilled, and lethal samurai warrior. You, as a player, still have power. What are you in Elden Ring? You're nothing. You're tarnished. You don't deserve to live. The only freedom and victory you can expect is the release of death, and even then you keep coming back to die again and again and again. Why? Why would anyone put themselves through this? Because it's worth it. Because you are worth it. The world of Elden Ring is difficult to explore without any clear signs or cues. Because moving out of your home to go to college or into a big city where you don't know anyone, you don't know anything, and can only rely on the kindness of strangers is difficult. Yes, the grind of combat in Elden Ring is trying, failing, dying, and repeating is unfair and unfortunate, but so is that new job or current job where you feel overwhelmed and ground down by everything around you, and the smallest mistake leads you into a panic, and there feels like there's no relief or satisfaction in sight. These past few months alone, we are reminded of how powerless we are with the world on a knife's edge through war, the rich getting richer while the world plummets into imbalance, corporations damaging the ecosystem and leading the world into climate catastrophe. It's all so hard and it's easy to give up. But we can't give up, because no matter how small we think we are, we have the capacity to do and be better. And maybe through something that simulates how difficult life can be, we can decide to survive on our own terms, upon our own wishes. We decide on how we improve and how we succeed. It's pretty obvious that Hidetaka Miyazaki was heavily inspired by the manga Berserk, where its protagonist, Guts, is a man who has everything taken from him at a young age, plunged into battle. Later, he is able to find friendship and find happiness, only to have his own best friend take everything away from him again, and walks alone in a world filled with monstrosities and evil he can't hope to defeat. This inspiration, though, was more than merely a cool aesthetic that he puts into his games, but the understanding that fiction can exist as difficult and brutal by nature because the nature of existence is difficult and brutal. But it's the ability to be so uncompromising in that vision that it's actually the most optimistic. Ernest Hemingway in Farewell to Arms writes, "The world breaks everyone, and afterward, many are strong at the broken places, but those that will not break, it kills. It kills the very good, and the very gentle, and the very brave impartially. If you are none of these, you can be sure it will kill you too, but there will be no special hurry." That is the beauty of Demon Souls, of Dark Souls, of Bloodbourne, of Sekiro, and yes, even Elden Ring. Why so many people have been so deeply enamored and obsessed over this game. Because we, as a species, as a people, we go out on our own terms. We go out fighting. We go out screaming and kicking and cursing the night. Not because we know we can win, but because we have the capacity and perseverance to win.
When I'm playing these games, I think, this is the way I'd want to die. In a way that is amusing or interesting or that creates a story I can share. Death and rebirth, trying and overcoming, we want that cycle to be enjoyable. In life, death is a horrible thing. In play, it can be something else.
Hidetaka Miyazaki is merely using the medium of video games to contextualize the everyday struggle. Miyazaki knows that no matter what knocks us down, we will figure it out, get up, and we will conquer our adversity. Miyazaki didn't make a game purposefully to hurt you or to make you quit, but to make a game that believed in your greatest qualities. Maybe we needed to be reminded just how clever and skillful we are, and how much we need each other when the world feels at its darkest. Miyazaki believes that you matter, the collective whole, and the individual. More so than any AAA game that gives you power, in Elden Ring, you earn the power. Power that was earned through perseverance, skill, and intelligence. The same God-given power that you have right now. Elden Ring is only difficult and esoteric and frustrating because you just don't know how powerful, in that sense, you truly, honestly are. I want to close with a personal story I had with another game in the Souls franchise, Bloodbourne. I remember first playing Bloodbourne back when it came out in 2015. I was so excited because my good friend at the technical college I studied at kept telling me how excited he was, and I wanted to know what the hype surrounding it entailed. Much like a lot of you are right now, I was swept up in the hype and paid for my ignorance. I was decimated by this game. Between the villagers, brutes, werewolves, and other atrocities I had encountered in this game, I had no idea where I was going. The save points were so few and far between, dying meant going all the way back to the beginning of the level. I had finally gotten to the point where once I had finally made some serious progress in the game, going as far as the Shadows of Yharnam and the Forbidden Woods, or after I finally beat them after what felt like 20 tries, then suddenly, there was a power outage at my house. And my save data got corrupted and lost. I lost everything, and I wanted to quit. I didn't want to play anymore. All that effort, trial and error, was wasted. It took me almost 2 weeks to get to where I was, and I knew something like that I couldn't do again. I didn't have it in me. But then time passed, and something happened. My distance from it allowed me to talk to other people who were also struggling with the game. I read tips, strategies, and I got courage again, and I picked it up one last time. Soon, it all clicked. I had to stop playing it the way I thought I had to, and started playing it the way not the fanbase did, but how the developers wanted, by being honest with my playstyle. I learned about shortcuts, enemy patterns, item usage, saving my currency for what weapons and items would work best against what enemy, focusing on the best stats for my playstyle. The Souls community is, in a word, infamous for being toxic, and any way that isn't the way they went through with pain and suffering is wrong, and I hate that. Because in life, there's absolutely no fault in asking for help, or learning from mistakes, using whatever easy means to save your time and energy and improving based upon identifying your problems and working through them. It won't be easy and it won't be fun, but you'll get it. And in Bloodbourne, I got it. I was so much better at the game when I was allowed to not care what anyone thought of me, and with a different plan of attack where it took me 2 weeks to get to the Forbidden Woods, I had gotten to it in 2 days. I invested in my own perseverance, in believing in my own ability to improve. It doesn't matter if you're new or a veteran player to this franchise, anyone can successfully operate through the world, find better weapons and gear, level up, and defeat enemies all within your own terms. There is never one specific way to play these games, because there is no one specific way to live your life, merely the one that feels essential, honest, and true to yourself. And when you do that, you have truly understood Elden Ring, its defiance in the popular Western AAA game market, and why Elden Ring and From Software is so beloved, and why you can't remove difficulty from Software, because difficulty is in its theme, the theme of perseverance. Arise, fellow Tarnished, now is the time to recognize your worth. Ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary buds, if you've made it to the end of this video, I really can't thank you enough, and the fact that you've indulged me in this degree means everything. Obviously, I love this game, and I wanted to share why I loved it so much, and while it was a task to make, it was a blast recording game footage, and particularly splicing together my best boss battles with everything else I've captured. I want to make a personal thank you to special guest Joseph Montecillo. He is a huge inspiration for this channel, and I'm considerably grateful to be able to work with him. Not just on this video, but on his recent video essay on Chris Jericho. Please check him out, he makes fantastic video essays on wrestling. Particularly his series on Walking the King's Road and his epic on Bryan Danielson. I will link his YouTube page and his Twitter in the description below. And one final thing, I recently passed 100 subscribers while editing this video, and wow. I can't begin to thank those who have supported me and continue to support me here and on my Twitter. I hope to make more great things soon. If you made it to the end, please let me know if you've been playing Elden Ring. What do you think of the game, and what tips would you also give new players? And overall, make sure to keep up with my escapades on Twitter. That's @AndosMan94. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and tap that bell so you never miss a video. Have a good day, keep safe, and in spite of it all, life is beautiful.